Joining me right now for more analysis on infrastructure and the budget as we watch a market really turn around from some of the lows we saw last week. We are now up 465. We have Reason Magazine editor-at-large Matt Welch and Washington Times columnist and former Bush administration aide Matt Mackowiak. Good to see you both. I know, in fact, I thought about you when this news came out, which is one of the reasons you're here right now, because I thought, you're not going to like this one single bit because you're very fiscally disciplined, and you'd like the government to be fiscally disciplined. And do you see this as not continuing on with sort of the mantra of the Republican Party? The
president's budget gives up on the idea of balancing the budget in 10 years. That's been an aspirational goal. Even if they didn't mean it, they said it. They would do. Paul Ryan would say, we're going to balance it in 10 years. We're not going to make any of the hard decisions now. 10 years from now, though, we're going to make hard. They've stopped that now. And it's not the president, right? This is the president's budget, which doesn't matter. It's dead on arrival. It's Congress. It's what Congress did Friday and signed into law. They've increased government spending by more than $300 billion. A unified Republican Congress and a Republican president is now spending at a higher rate than the federal government did in between 2010 and 2014 under Barack Obama.
Matt Welch, I joke sometimes that we're living in an Alice in Wonderland world, well, at least when it comes to the Federal Reserve, because, look, if the economy does poorly, investors get all excited because they think that somehow the Fed will keep the spigot open and therefore the market goes up. And we've started to have this sort of come to Jesus, if you would, moment in the markets recently with the expectation that inflation would be there. But I'm wondering about sort of this come to Jesus moment in Washington. I mean, how is it, Matt Mackowiak, we got two Matts here today, that the Republicans are now saying, yeah, okay, we'll just spend and don't have to care about balancing a budget? I mean, this for decades has been their platform. Are we in Alice in Wonderland in Washington now?
I think it's a realization this year that in order to do anything, they're going to need 60 votes in the Senate, and there's only 51 Republicans. And so even if they wanted to balance the budget, they couldn't do it this year. And as Matt Welch pointed out rightly, it's been an aspirational goal to get to a balanced budget over a 10-year window, but that's been an aspirational goal for a very long time.
Well, aspiration is good, right? We should all have goals. Yeah. We should all have aspirations. And now they're saying, it's not going to happen, so why even kid ourselves?
Yeah, that's right. And last time we had a balanced budget was when Newt Gingrich was Speaker, and we haven't had one since then. Now, that said, this budget reflects the Trump administration's priorities. It reflects infrastructure, or it reflects the increase in defense spending. It reflects money invested in opioids, in trying to prevent the opioid epidemic from continuing. It does have significant cutbacks in domestic spending. I think it's $3.6 trillion over 10 years in reduced spending for domestic programs. It's got about $800 billion, I think, in economic growth that's in there. So it does see lower deficits in the out years, 5, 6, 7 year, 8 years out. But we're going to have higher deficits in the short term. Absolutely. We have to see this economy continue to grow.
Let me ask you, Matt Welch, about these higher deficits in the short term, because I'm a big believer that these tax cuts are actually going to do a lot for our economy, and they're going to do a lot for earnings, and overall it's going to be good for employment, et cetera, and maybe finally get some inflation as we're starting to see in this economy. But, look, if it doesn't do all that, we get a real problem.
We have a real problem in any case, because what can't go on forever won't. And we're going from $20 trillion in debt now. We're going to maybe see $30 trillion soon at some point. And that point is happening now. It started happening a couple weeks ago. The cost of borrowing is going to get to recent record highs. We had low cost of borrowing for almost 10 years.
I know, but Matt, Welch, I know. I have to stop you. I mean, look at the 10. Do we have the 10-year and the 30-year? We'll put you up. The 30-year, you can still borrow at 3%. That's nuts.
It's nuts, and it's going to get even more nuts as debt service starts to outpace even our military spending.
Well, no, I'm saying it's nuts because it's low. I mean, I would think that, if you're going to lend someone money for 30 years, you ought to be able to offer them, or 10 years, you ought to be able to offer them more than 2.86% return on their money. And so when I say it's nuts, I mean it because it's so low. You're telling me, though, we got to worry because it's going to go, what, 8%?
It is low. Who knows what it's going to go up, but it's going to go up. These things always do. And so when the cost of debt service becomes higher than the Pentagon budget, which it's going to do in a few years, which is a crazy number there, Also, when you have such, and we're, because QE is ending, we have to sell a lot of federal treasuries right now. It's going to have a negative impact on economic growth. So, this is a consensus economic view.
I guess one of my biggest frustrations with how they calculate their budgets there in Washington, D.C., and my friend Neil Cavuto has spoken about this as well. We see eye to eye on it, is that there's this sense in Washington that if the U.S. economy is growing by a certain amount, then you must grow your budget by that same amount. And if you don't, then somehow you're cutting spending. Matt, I think about this like a family, right? If you're lucky enough to make more money in a given year, you don't need to spend more, right? You can kind of keep it a status quo. You don't need to increase your spending just because you're making more, but somehow our government thinks it does.
Yeah, that's right. But keep in mind, in this most recent budget deal, they did two things that were important politically. They got the budget funded through the rest of the year, and they got the debt limit so that it's past the end of the year. Those were going to be potentially political issues in the midterm elections, and the midterms are going to be very important. Do the Democrats take the House back? What is the margin in the Senate? How does that affect President Trump's final 2 years in office? I think the White House recognizes that they need 60 votes in the Senate this year to do anything. It's why they're putting in bipartisan proposals forward on immigration, on infrastructure. I think you're going to see that on trade. That's the direction they want to go. But there are going to be opportunities to save money as the economy keeps growing.
Well, all good. But, I just think that the Democrats now are getting handed a platform, and we are looking at Alice in Wonderland when suddenly I hear so many liberals saying we need to spend less. Anyway, Matt, thank you.